Welcome back to another edition of the Talking National League podcast, episode 4 tonight. So on tonight's podcast, we're going to be looking into greater depth in who we feel could potentially go on to win the Vanarama National League this season. We're going to be featuring the likes of Wrexham, Chesterfield and Notts County, specifically going into them into greater depth. We'll also be giving in mentions to Dagenham, Solihull and other sides who have great odds on potentially winning the league next season. But before we do that and go into depth about that, we're going to be speaking to Thomas Feeney. That's pre-recorded, and he's going to be giving you all the news on the latest transfers that have happened over the past week within the Vanarama National League. While you are watching, I would much appreciate it if you could give the podcast a like and a subscribe, and give me a subscribe if you haven't already. It will be much appreciated. And yeah, let's get into talking to Thomas about the latest transfer news within the Vanarama National League.
Certainly is going to be a busy few days coming up. It's a really interesting time now when it comes to contracts and transfers. A lot of clubs obviously do not want to announce that signings have been made until it's all official, verified with the FA and the National League as well. With a lot of contracts coming to an end now, and then those new ones can be signed. Now, a few deals that have been confirmed. Chesterfield, it's an interesting one because they are seemingly, there's just a little bit of a tweak in terms of the way they're going to be doing their business and kind of the profile of player that they're after. Now, Michael Garzi is someone who made a big impression with a short loan spell at Dover Athletic in that incredible game against Wrexham. He scored a hat-trick, and it's something where they certainly rate him highly enough to pay an undisclosed fee to Kings Lynn Town for him. He's somebody who Paul Cook has spoken a lot of, and he's somebody who has potential. He's somebody who certainly has kind of the raw attributes, and there was interest from a couple of other clubs as well, at least one other National League club in him, and also from further afield as well. So that's somebody who Paul Cook really wanted to get in. Looking at York City and Sam Sanders, who made a good impression with a loan spell last season. Obviously, if you're going to help a team get promoted, you are going to be in that category. And what's impressive is Nottingham Forest kind of wanted him to remain within that youth setup. They were willing to discuss terms of a new contract. And he's made the decision that, you know what, I want to be in first team football. I want to be in a position where I'm playing week in, week out in that senior setting. And that's why he has signed a contract with John Oskey's team. He's somebody who, in defence, again, a lot of potential there. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of these signings, is that there is certainly something there where they could do something in the future. And obviously, in the National League level, do something right here, right now. Another one is Lewis Lomas, who's left Brackley Town. His contract had expired. He's gone to Southend United. Now, it's a really interesting one here because he was part of that incredible defence that Brackley showed in the National League North. And there had been kind of a lot of interest in him from a lot of admirers, I'd say, maybe not official bids, but a lot of admirers in him. And I think this is a real coup for Southend United. He's one of 3 new signings that were announced on Tuesday. And I think what it's shown with Southend is last season, their signings maybe going into the campaign, there seemed to be maybe not particularly a connection between the signings. There seemed to be not particularly joined up thinking between one signing to the next. The ones that they're getting in now, it's clear that John still, Stan Collimore's obviously putting his social media messages about them as well. There is clear cohesion and kind of a clear plan regarding what is going on with those deals. It's going to be a really interesting couple of weeks coming up now, because obviously pre-season begins. We then go into a position where EFL clubs will start to decide, that player, we don't want him anymore. That player, he needs a loan move. That player, maybe we can transfer list. And that's where National League clubs can really come into their own, because there are going to be some players who right now aren't attainable. They're going to be told that you've got a pre-season to impress yourself, at League 2 level, at League 1 level. It's now going to be a case of those pre-season training sessions take place. Maybe they play 1 or 2 matches as well. And then those clubs go, do you know what? You need to be moving on. And, there's certainly 5 or 6 players I know of where that's kind of the case now. They've got pre-season. They've got a chance to impress at a higher level. If for whatever reason that does not happen, they're going to be told, right, you can move on. And there's kind of a list of National League clubs, Step 1 and Step 2, who are both going to be looking at that. Just going into the National League North, and Darlington have confirmed the signing of Marcus Madison, who made what an incredible spell he had at Peterborough United. It was a few years ago, mind now, and obviously he kind of went down a few divisions to play for Spalding United briefly. He is now available. That is subject to FA and National League ratification, but that could be a massive signing, especially if he can recreate that form that he showed in League One. Well, it's certainly going to be another interesting week of transfers, and good to speak to you, Lewis.
Cheers, Tom, for giving us an insight to the latest transfers around the Vanarama National League. So talking a bit about this week's podcast then. Now we're going to be speaking to a Wrexham fan, Andy from Fearless in Devotion, Colin from Analyst Bar and Notts County Stats, and Tom from Spy Rights Right on behalf of Chesterfield about their thoughts heading into 2022-23 campaign on their hopes to win the Vanarama National League. Obviously, we will know. I can already tell the other fans in the chat. You may feel that you're going to win the league next season. I don't know. This is specifically based off the odds that the bookies have, brought out on social media. Why we're focusing in specifically on these 3 clubs. For fans that are watching and thinking, I want to know a little bit more about the relegation battle this season, sides who are coming down relegated, what to expect from them, I would suggest going back after this podcast and watching the most recent podcasts that we've done with a York City fan, Scunthorpe fan, Oldham fan. We've gone on loads of the past 3 episodes of focusing in on those 3. So firstly, bringing on tonight, we'll bring on Andy, Wrexham supporter. Andy, how are you doing?
Not too bad. The bookies, eh? You never really meet a poor bookie. They're not normally far off the pace, are they, Luke?
No, they're certainly not. Based off last season, then second place finish for Wrexham. Stockport went on to get promoted. Surely Wrexham are the favourites heading into this season.
Do you know what? I'd say so. As a Wrexham fan before the takeover, I was used to losing my best players every post-season. We went through about 4 seasons where we lost our top scorer. Anyone who was showing any promise would get picked up by someone else. We haven't lost a single player that we didn't want to lose this close season, and I think that's a huge difference for us. I think Parkinson came in late to the last transfer window, the last summer transfer window, and couldn't really get his business done. I think that the team really struggled until Christmas. And then in January, he managed to get a few players in that made his system work. So the likes of Ollie Palmer really shone for us, was really a focal point. And it took a lot of the pressure off Paul Mullin, and he was able to thrive as well. That also released the midfield, and the likes of James Jones had better ends to the season. So I think the squad is in a pretty good place. I think there's a few to come in, but I don't think we're going to do huge business. I would be very surprised if we did more than 4 or 5 to replace the people who have left.
Yeah, it's a fair assessment that of Wrexham's previous season, losing to Grimsby 2. Sorry to remind you of that.
Yeah.
We'll be speaking to a Chesterfield fan tonight, so I'll bring on Tom from Spy Rights Right. Tom, how are you doing then?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, Luke. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. It's been a busy few weeks, hasn't it, within Chesterfield at the moment?
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. The merry-go-round never stops, does it, in pre-season? I think we've signed 7 players so far, and obviously we've released 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as well, and we've transfer listed a further 4. So there's going to be quite a lot of difference really in the squad that you'll see from Chesterfield next season. I've been quite impressed by our transfer business so far, it has to be said. We've got a bit of a mixture of EFL players and sort of young up-and-comers. We've signed, for example, Joe Cook from Bognor Regis Town, who I think's 23 years old, really highly regarded as a good ball-playing centre-back, which I'm sure will fit in really well with Paul Cook's style of play. And we've recruited really well down both wing-back roles as well, I would say. We've got Brandon Horton and Bailey Clements, 2 left-backs, and Raheem Shackelford, who obviously was playing for Maidenhead United last season. So, yeah, really good.
Yeah, so I remember Shackelford against Halifax, did a very good job. I'm sure that'll work out as a good signing. Very interesting business from Chesterfield and Notts County. Talking about Notts County, let's bring in Colin to the studio now. Colin, how are you doing then tonight?
Not too bad, thanks for having me.
No problem. So, talk us through Notts County's business so far within the Vanarama National League.
Yeah, equally, like you just heard from Chesterfield, we've been quite busy as well early doors, and I think that gives bookies confidence to back us, certainly, and it's been good business. We seem to be looking much more at National League North players and trying to make sure that players are on that kind of upward trajectory. So we've signed the likes of Sam Austin, Geraldo Barami from Kidderminster, players who have got games behind them. They've got quality. They've performed incredibly well. And then also, we've recruited from Gateshead as well. I think Gateshead fans are probably sick of hearing from us, really. Kedwin Scott, Macaulay Langstaff were recruited from them. And I'm hopeful that we might visit Gateshead again with another player that I'll bring up later on. And obviously, there's been a lot of talk around Notts and their takeover that happened years ago now. And the kind of stats-based approach and the recruitment kind of process that we try and go through. But it's quite interesting that you've also got a player like Aidan Baldwin, who's joined us from MK Dons after a loan in the National League, who has come through more through the manager, through Luke Williams, someone that he's worked with at Swindon, someone he's worked with at MK Dons as well. So there's an interesting kind of transfer narrative, but also kind of eyes on the exit as well. We've not had too many out the door. And obviously, eyes are on players like Ruben Rodriguez, Cal Roberts to see how long we can look after them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if anyone is in the chat from Notts County, Chesterfield or Wrexham or any other Vanarama National League club, you are free to get involved with who you feel may get promoted next season. So I did put out a tweet the other day on who other people who are followers thought would get promoted this season, winning the league. And surprisingly, the majority of them did actually say Notts County, which is a surprise considering Wrexham, although they haven't done any business so far. It's surprising to see after Wrexham's finished last season and the investment that we will see that they are favourites according to certain fans on followers on Twitter. Colin, what's your thoughts on that? Do you agree with people saying that Notts County are the favourites heading into next season?
No, it just raises the anxiety levels a tad, unfortunately. Do you know what I mean? We've had obviously failed playoff pushes and stuff, and I think the one thing that does give me a little bit of confidence, if you look at the sides that have gone up historically from the National League, it's about being brave and changing things. You look at clubs like Stockport, for example, who went up last year, massive changes. Change manager, huge amounts of ins and outs. And that's to give confidence for clubs like, I see Oldham, for example, that have had, takeovers and stuff today and thinking about their kind of recruitment that maybe have not started. Obviously, we talked a little bit off air before we came on that Wrexham haven't started doing their business yet. I think it's being okay with the fact that there are going to be changes and you can still overcome those changes and make those moves. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've recruited really well. But there's an awful lot of pre-season still to go. I think not solely just through the door today in terms of the players getting boots on grass. So I'm fully expecting that the squad that takes the stage in the first National League game will look a little bit different to the squad that we've got now. So it's probably premature based on the early recruitment that we've done, and I do think the picture is going to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the signs that they have made have been quite surprising considering Notts County's business in recent years. They're well known for taking the best players from other clubs. For example, Carl Cameron leaving Torquay last season to join Notts County. Notts County this season the majority of the signs have been dropping into the lower leagues. The likes of bringing players in from Kidderminster. The players who have obviously got promoted from Gateshead. they're good signings, you have to say. Who they brought in from Gateshead, Langstaff being one of them, and an exceptional striker in the Vanarama National League North last season, wasn't he? Do you feel that this could work, and what could potentially be the risks for this?
I think the thing that stands out for me is the squad age, for example. So one of the things that stood out to me when we took the field in the playoff eliminators and those sort of things is, although Notts have created this narrative around being a kind of recruiting young players and like you say, bringing those young players through, we tended to rely as the season went on at those slightly more experienced campaigners, which you can kind of understand in difficult games like playoffs. One of the things that I think we're starting to do now is we're starting to recruit players like Austin, like Langstaff, Scott as well, I suppose, who are sort of early to mid-20s, so not necessarily those young prospects that can be a little bit volatile. I think about players like Frank Vincent, who had a really great start to Notts and then sort of tailed off a little bit. Ed Francis was a player that we signed last season, who again, young player, came in, did well, dipped, came out, came back in again. So I wonder whether Notts have looked at this and gone, do you know what, we need to look at a slightly older type of recruitment, 23, 24 players who've got games under their belts, been successful as well, in terms of promotion with Gateshead, with the two lads we've got from Gateshead. Risks, you talked about risks and dangers. I think it's not necessarily about the standard that they've come from, because as National League fans or fans of National League clubs, we know that we've got players who could step up and move on. So we know that we've got those players that can step into the Football League if we need to. So National League clubs, National League North clubs, National League South clubs are probably feeling the same about their players as well. So I think the biggest risk is actually we've lost a couple of players who are big. So we've lost Kyle Wotton, we've lost Eli Sam, big lads, 6'4", 6'5", and we already looked a little bit vulnerable in the air, set pieces, those sort of things. So we seem to have brought players in who aren't 6'4", 6'5". We've got big lads, don't get me wrong, but they don't look physically that dominant. And I think Notts have got some questions to answer with the ball in the box anyway. So it'd be interesting to see how we deal with that, certainly.
Yeah, I've been quite intrigued by Notts County's business so far, as well as Chesterfield's. Ian Birchall has come in the chat. I actually know him from Notts County podcasts. I don't know if that's his real name. Could you confirm? But it's going to be another tough season. Some great teams. Yeah, there certainly is this season, especially with some other sides coming down like Oldham. They're a side that it's going to be interesting to see how they do heading into next season. But yeah, talking a bit more about Notts County, you think of the signings that they've made. Sam Austin, wow, what a player he was when Halifax played at Kidderminster in the FA Cup last season. It's going to be interesting to see what we are to expect from Notts County. We do know that they're going to be high up the leagues like they are. Same with Chesterfield, Wrexham. They're all going to be, high up next season. And it's going to be interesting to see what style of play Luke Williams does implement. Do you reckon he will be implementing the Ian Birchall style of play, and that style of play that we've seen at Notts ever since they've come down to the Vanarama National? Do you think it's going to be that similar sort of playing style, especially with new players coming in too?
Similar, certainly in terms of possession, and he's talked about that in quite a few podcasts that he's done, both official ones and through sort of fan channels, which I think is credit to him, because there was a little bit of a criticism from Notts fans about a disconnect with Ian Birchnell, not necessarily feeling particularly kind of connected to him. He was always, I know it sounds a weird thing to say, but he was always very professional and very reserved, and I think some fans struggle to warm to that. So he's done a very good job of winning hearts and minds, already. I think we are going to need to see tweaks. We are going to need to see changes. I think the reason why Notts are still in the National League is because we didn't have a plan B, particularly away from home. So I think he's going to have a few different approaches. And I think what's interesting is to look at the back line. We've got the possibility of playing 3 centre-halves and playing wing-backs. We've already got that in the squad. But I think also we've got the opportunity of going to a flat back 4. We've kept Adam Chickson. We've kept Richard Brindley, who would be probably my choices at left and right, because they can play in the centre as well and tighten that up a little bit. So I do think there will be a few tweaks. I do think there will be a plan B. I do think that we'll expect Notts to take a few different shapes rather than, shall we say, that slightly more one-dimensional approach that unfortunately got found out last season.
Yeah, it seems to be a bigger squad this season for Notts County, and keeping those experienced players like Chicks and Palm, who were there last season and performed. Even the likes of Carl Roberts, albeit he is very injury prone, on his day, Carl Roberts, what he performs at Vanarama National League level, it's exceptional what he can do. I've seen him in the playoffs before, when I think it was in the semi-final a couple of seasons ago when Notts County reached the final against Harrogate, and unfortunately for you, lost in the final. It's interesting to see these signings and how they will fit in with the more experienced players heading into next season. But yeah, do you reckon this will be the end of the Notts County business now, or could we be seeing anything else in the upcoming weeks?
I think there's a few spaces in the squad still, and like I say, Luke Williams' sort of press seems to suggest that there's going to be business. Obviously, that might depend on what happens with the likes of Ruben Rodriguez and Cal Roberts. There's been a recent article in the Nottingham sort of local press about the interest, and it was a statement of, defiance, if you like, from the owners to say, look, if he does go, he goes for a big fee and he doesn't go to a National League club, etc. And I can't help but wonder whether that's preparing fans. Maybe that's just my typical Notts pessimism, but it's like preparing Notts fans for an inevitable exit. And do you know what? If he goes for a big fee, so be it, because I don't think either of those two players, like you say, have got anything left to prove at National League level. It's just whoever's got the money to be able to buy them. I think that's going to lead us to have a few changes in midfield and those sort of things. I think Greg Ollie, which is the Gateshead player that I'd like to see, which I'm sure Gateshead are sick of seeing Notts County bids going for their players, but Greg Ollie at Gateshead might be a great addition, someone who can feed the two new strikers and knows exactly the types of ball to play. Omar Musa is a name that's been mentioned, who's been released by Weymouth. It's probably slightly younger than the typical signings that we're signing at 23, 24, but a good squad player. I like Gold Omateo. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, at Kings Lynn.
Yeah, he used to play for Halifax. Yeah,
I like him a lot in terms of target man, but also mobile. I saw him as a possible replacement for Carl Wootton. Not every game, but you know what I mean? If you're defending a lead and stuff and you need a player up there to kind of hold the ball up, I could see him as a good option. But again, we seem to be quite striker heavy at the moment. And then I think there's I think it's unfair to say a question mark, but Slocum, who played in goal towards the end of the season, really stabilised this. But going back to that lack of height that we seem to have in the back three or in the back five or whatever we start to play, I do feel that we need a goalkeeper that comes beyond his 6-yard box, dominates things a little bit. And I'm not sure whether Slocum is necessarily that type of goalkeeper, although I do think he is still a very good goalkeeper at this level. So I think I wouldn't be surprised to see a goalkeeper coming at Meadow Lane.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what Notts County do the business they do within the next couple of weeks. People coming in the chat now. A Woking fan. I know Woking have done some quite impressive business so far within the National League. Just a reminder for people watching, I know a lot of people have just suddenly started tuning in now. If you're not a supporter of Wrexham, Chesterfield or Notts County, you can still feel free to give your thoughts on who you feel may get promoted next season. Albeit if you are a Wrexham, Chesterfield, Notts County supporter, feel free to give your thoughts on the podcast and also your thoughts on your team heading into next season. But yeah, Alistair, I believe it is, downsides to lead the mighty Woking into the playoffs, he says. Chesterfield fan now. Danny, I hope I pronounce this right. Danny Higginson, I believe it is. Chesterfield fan here. Notts will have a better season than Wrexham. That's quite a big statement. I'm still torn between who to put as top spot so far this season. Just to be honest, for the lack of business Wrexham have done. However, there will be obviously some signings coming in the upcoming weeks and even days. He's also come back and said, really happy with our signings. Ollie Banks from Barrow and Sabara from Ipswich will be signing. Good mix of EFL and non-league players brought in. Yeah, we will move on to Chesterfield now. So, Tom, talk us through your thoughts heading into next season as a Chesterfield fan. We've all already slightly mentioned them, but what are your thoughts on the business that they've made?
Yeah, I think we always knew there were going to be quite a lot of changes this summer, to be honest. I mean, when you change manager, they come in and they've got their own sort of ideas of how they want to play, haven't they? Their own style of play. And obviously, we had Paul Cook here in the past, and he's always been very much a 4-2-3-1, dominate possession, get your fullbacks overlapping, getting crosses in the box kind of manager. And I think the recruitment that we've done probably reflects that quite a lot. I mean, we've recruited 2 left backs, a left winger, a right back, which will probably allow us to push Jeff King maybe higher up to a right wing position. So it looks like we're very much strengthened in the wide areas, which was probably an area we maybe needed to strengthen in terms of having fullbacks and wingers, because we only really had wing backs last season. We released Alex Whittle, which was a very unpopular decision, I've got to say, with the Town fans, because he was probably a good candidate for our player of the season last year. He was a really good fullback who got up and down the pitch, defended well, put crosses in, and he even popped up with the odd goal too. So I think that one was probably the only player that we were sort of sad to see go. The rest of them we sort of knew were going to make way, really. And I think you look at the signings that he's made, there's a mixture of EFL experience. You look at the likes of George Cooper, left winger from Plymouth. I think he's had over 150 appearances in the EFL. He's played for the likes of Crewe, Peterborough, teams like that. And then we've also got young players up and coming from leagues below, like Darren Alderker in midfield, who played for Dorking last season when they got promoted. And by all accounts, is a very good centre mid. I think he's meant to be a good ball player, good passing, good at holding onto the ball. So he'll be very much a Paul Cook kind of player. Then up front, we've got Michael Garzi. He's only 22 years old, and obviously got the hat trick against Wrexham, as I will mention. So hopefully he'll be able to pop up with a few goals. He scored against Chesterfield actually at the Stadium for Dover, which was not the best defending from us, but he tucked it away, didn't he? So yeah, he's a good prospect, I think, and at the age of 22, he's probably going to learn a lot from Kabi Shamanga. You would have thought, and I think you've got to look at the players that we already do have, the likes of Shamanga, Danny Rowe, Jack Clark, coming back. You know, we do have some very good players in for this level, and I think the players that we've added to this team, it does add a lot of balance to the squad. And obviously, you never quite know how it's going to go with young players. They could take a while to gel. They could settle in straight away. But I think the players that we have signed, they all look like they've got potential. And Paul Cook is good at getting potential out of players, in my experience. When we won League Two the other year, he brought in a bunch of relative unknown players, the likes of Sam Morsey, who was a bit out of sorts at Port Vale, and he turned into a top-class League One midfielder. So that really shows the kind of manager Paul Cook is. He's very good at sort of developing players on, especially young players. So yeah, overall, I'm really happy with our transfer business, and I think we're not quite done yet. I mean, as Danny said, Ollie Banks coming in, another experienced EFL midfielder. He was at Chesterfield in the past, and I always liked him. And possibly Armando Dobra as well from Ipswich, another forward, has been linked with us. So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space, certainly, when you're looking into their transfers. Asante, then, now he's been transfer listed. I like the look of him. I know he was quite liked at Chesterfield, especially the season prior to the one that's just gone now. Obviously, he's had his injury troubles, and a lot of Halifax Town fans are saying, "Oh, we need to snap him up. You know, be brilliant for us. It'd be a brilliant signing. You know, good target man, good with his feet, can finish." What are your thoughts on him being transfer listed then? Because I know a lot of Chesterfield fans, there's quite a divide in the thought of this, of him leaving the club and departing and being transfer listed. When you think of what he's capable of, what are your actual thoughts on him being transfer listed?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one with Asante, really, because like you've quite rightly said, last season he was a really good player for us. Obviously, he was one of the first players that James Rowe brought in, and I think he got 10 or 15 goals, obviously, when we pushed for the playoffs in the end. And he looked really good. Like you said, good hold-up play, good pace, good with his feet, and could finish as well. So, yeah, I think this year he's been quite unlucky with injuries. And I think, obviously, when a new manager comes in and they haven't seen what's happened before with a player, Paul Cook won't know sort of what Asante is capable of, and he's gonna go off the players he wants to bring in, kind of thing. So I think he's more a victim of that. He's more a victim of Cook being a bit ruthless. But he's a very good player at this level, and I think if a Halifax or any team really did snap him up, he'd definitely do a job. He just probably needs a pre-season to get fit and firing, and I think he'd be a real acquisition. Yeah,
someone's come in and said Southend United, the team to watch. We have made some astute signings, I think is what he meant. Garzi then, he signed for Chesterfield. You have slightly mentioned him there. I think this is a bit of a risky signing. I don't know what it's like with the sizes of Chesterfield and Notts County, because every signing for us has to be perfect, I think, as a Halifax Town fan. But for Chesterfield, do you think it is a risk for Garzi bringing into the club when you think of his goal-scoring record last season? Obviously had that standout game against Wrexham, which, put him in the light for, a lot of clubs heading into next season. and obviously he had a good game against Chesterfield too. Do you feel that it is a bit of a risk and it might not come off this signing?
I'm not sure, really. It's very difficult to say, isn't it? Especially with young players, because you never quite know, like I say, how they'll settle in. I think Garzi's got a lot of traits that Paul Cook will like, though. I will say that he's good on the ball, he's quick, he's tricky. He can take players on, and obviously he did score 5 goals in 20 games, which probably isn't the best return in the world. But when you consider he's only 22, in a year's time, he might have really come on and maybe gets 10, 15. You can never really say, can you? But I think Paul Cook will do his best to develop him. I think any player with pace in this league who can run at defences, that always causes problems. So that's a real bonus. And apparently he can play on the left wing as well as up front. So it gives us a bit of versatility as well. So I don't know. On the face of it, it is a good signing. But like you say, 22, maybe it's a bit of a risk, but I think it'll pay off, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Quigley also, last season, it was a bit of a mixed match season for him, I think, when he obviously left Yeovil to join Chesterfield. I think there were a lot of expectations on Quigley, especially when Tishamanga was injured for Chesterfield, for him to, initially start scoring and be as prolific as what Tishamanga was. However, it didn't really come off, and he never really got to see the true potential that he had. However, he did score in the playoffs against Lomas. Do you think he could be a key part of Chesterfield's success this season?
I think Quigley was a bit of a scapegoat last season, to be honest with you. The one thing I will say about him was it did take him a while to settle in at the club, and obviously he went a period of quite a few games without scoring a goal, and it wasn't for the want of trying. He did have a fair few good chances. I think his general hold-up play is pretty good. He's decent on the ball, especially for a lad of his size. He can actually take players on, and I think as long as he can sort out that goal scoring, that's the one thing, strikers, you need them to score goals, don't you? So if he can find the back of the net a bit more, I mean, like you say, the Solihull goal, really nice finish. He scored another absolute screamer against, I think it was Wealdstone as well, really, really well tucked away. But I think that was his only 2 goals. So if he can be more consistent in terms of finishing, like he was at Yeovil, then I think he can have a part to play. And I think probably a lot of Chesterfield fans might have already written him off. But for me, a lot of his other characteristics are good enough where that if he can notch a few more goals, then he'll be a real asset and a really good, I would say he'll probably be a plan B, but it'll be a good plan B.
Yeah. When I look at Chesterfield heading into next season, I always look at the start of how Chesterfield started last season and how successful they were at the top of the league. I think, they were starting to run away with it slightly. They were unbeatable. I think they were unbeaten at home until going into, I might be wrong here, going into 2022, Chesterfield last season. I know they were very strong at home until, the second half of the season. Obviously, they were very unfortunate with injuries, key injuries, including Tishamanga Oyeleke, I believe I pronounced that right, who plays in midfield. There were a lot of key injuries that happened last season for Chesterfield, which probably was the downfall of their season. Do you feel that now having that squad back, it's all that success they had last season at the start of the season with these little additions too, that Chesterfield could be favourites heading into next season?
I never like to use the word favourites because you never really know how it's going to pan out in football, do you? But to be honest with you, I think our aim has to be going for the league title. And I don't think that sounds arrogant to say that. I think with the recruitment we've made, the money we've spent, we've got to be up there, really. And like you've quite rightly said, last year, before all the injuries, it was really plain sailing and we looked pretty good for promotion. And then obviously we had the James Rowe saga, having to get rid of him, and that played a massive impact. Paul Cook came in mid-season with a squad he didn't know, had to try and change the system to 4-2-3-1, and it's kind of didn't really work that well. But now he's got a pre-season to sort of implement his style, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think we'll be up there next season. I don't know if we'll win the league, but I think top 3 has got to be the aim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul Cook, I think he'll emphasise his plans now heading into next season. He came in at quite a rough time period last season. I think Chesterfield fans were happy with him becoming the new Chesterfield manager, just based off what he'd done in the past at Chesterfield back when they were in the Football League. Now that he's had a pre-season behind him, you can tell he's bringing in his own players that he feel will have an impact on the team, having players like Tishamanga back. I feel that Chesterfield will be very, very strong heading into next season. Finally then on Chesterfield then, they are having a few pre-season friendlies, aren't they? And some quite interesting ones, and ones that make me, as a Halifax fan, jealous when I look at some of the pre-season friendlies that you've got. Marseille and Real Betis in pre-season. Marseille obviously being from France, Real Betis obviously being from Spain. What are your thoughts on that then?
We're not actually playing those teams. They're playing each other on our pitch, if that makes sense. But it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? It's completely out of nowhere. Like, they've announced a friendly between Marseille and Betis being played in Chesterfield. Don't know where it's come from, really. But I think it's only £10 a ticket to get down. So if any of you lads aren't doing anything that evening, why not go and watch some Champions League football?
No, it's not too far from ours. I know Nottingham's not too far either, and I don't think Wrexham is. So yeah, I may take your offer up on that nearer the time. Yeah, we've had people coming in the chat now. He's a Solihull Moors fan. Callum's put Solihull Moors need a fair few signings at the moment, as we can barely fill a starting 11. Although we have just literally signed Alex Reid from Stockport on loan. Yeah, it's been interesting at Solihull Moors. I will ask you all a bit about Solihull Moors later on in the episode. Joe Sabara's obviously has extended his stay with Solihull, which is crucial, and we will talk about that scenario with Wrexham later on in the episode. So yeah, talking a bit about Wrexham then now. What are your thoughts going into next season? Obviously, you've slightly mentioned, what's happened. We were talking a bit off air before on the Turncliffe situation with him being rumoured. You were talking about, just waiting until his contract expires at his current club before Wrexham go and announce the signing.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting one. I think he's a left-sided centre-half, pretty dominant in the air. Anyone that we can add that will add to a Tozer throw-in, I think Bill Parkinson will be looking at. Now, last season we lost 3 of our first choice back line. We lost Rob Layton, we lost Harry Lennon, and we lost Aaron Hayden at key parts of the season. So, when you go into Grimsby, you've got 3 sort of understudies. It was hard for us to really keep them out. And I think all their goals, or a large part of their goals, came from set plays. So he's looking to address that. He's looking to get, I think, is Tunnicliffe in, and what he would look there is someone that he wouldn't have to play Max Cleworth as much as he did towards the end of the season. Max Cleworth was a 19-year-old lad, very nice on the ball.
Yeah.
We didn't expect him to play as much as he did. He did, and he didn't let us down. He didn't have the best game against Grimsby. So if you think it's the real crunch match where you want your experienced player to set up, we didn't have that. We had Max didn't have a great game. So, if you can bring in, you can study that area, that looks a good sort of start. Now, when it comes to signings overall, I look at the Paul Mullin signing last season. Now, not the sort of calibre it is, but the way they did it. So Mullin got released. They expressed an interest. They knew they weren't going to get him straight away because he had to speak to league players, but eventually they did get him. They waited, they bided their time. They didn't get anyone else sort of go, right, okay, well, let's get a backup to Mullin. They waited for their man on. In the end, it took a phone call from Rob McElhenney to actually get his signature. But, they got their man after a long while. And I wonder if that's what they're doing this pre-season. I wonder if they've targeted 4 or 5 players in 4 or 5 positions, and they're biding their times to make sure they get the right players and not just bringing people in for the sake of it to fill a squad.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know when you have so much money like Wrexham have, like we talk about, not counting Chesterfield and them having big budgets, Wrexham's is probably 3 times as big as that when you're thinking of the calibre of players that we've seen them bringing in the past. Yeah, we saw the impact last season, how didn't go to plan at the start of the season for Wrexham. They were surrounding the lower ends of the playoffs, and then as we into the season, they had that January transfer window. They managed to bring in McFadden, who was a wing back. Ollie Palmer, what a significant impact he had on the Wrexham squad, having that big man, little man sort of partnership with Palmer and Mullin, and how that worked going into the second half of the season. Now, you think of that partnership and you think heading into next season, Ollie Palmer having a full season ahead of him. Same with Paul Mullin. I know Paul Mullin went through a few injury troubles halfway through the season or so. Them two can stay fit throughout the season. The likes of Jordan Davies supplying them with goals, adding to the assists, Luke Young in the midfield, Hayden Tozer at the back, McFadden, Hall Johnson, obviously a new goalkeeper hopefully coming in. We will talk a little bit about that. Wrexham look like they're going to be unbeatable heading into next season. They really are going to be a force under Phil Parkinson. And I think now that he's had a season in the National League, Phil Parkinson, he's had time to give an insight, have a look into the National League. He can progress next season, going to places like Maidenhead where they have struggled in the past. Knowing how to beat sides like that, which he did, to be fair, do towards the end of the season. What are your thoughts then on Parkinson as a manager? Like, I've seen a lot of Wrexham fans have quite a divide in him. There were a point in last season where they were saying 50% were saying basically stay, the other 50% were saying, no, he needs to leave, we need a new manager because of such high expectations at Wrexham. What are your thoughts on him as a manager? Obviously, he will be staying next season now. I don't think you'd want him to leave at this moment in time because he's bringing in the right players. Players are going to be coming in the upcoming days. What are your actual thoughts on him as a manager heading into next season?
I think that Parkinson may have been Jordan Davis equaliser away from getting the bullet at one point last season. It was really that bad, because it's not the fact that Wrexham were in and around the bottom of the playoffs, as you said. That's fair enough. It was the standard of football we were playing. It was the two combined were just. It wasn't a great watch, and we weren't particularly doing that well considering how much we'd spent. Now, the sort of background to that is Parkinson came quite late into the club and wasn't really able to get the targets that he wanted to make his system work. Now, the key thing about Parkinson is he loves a 3-5-2. That is his system. He gets players to play that system, and he doesn't deviate from that system at all. For the first part of that year, we did not have the players to play that system. We didn't have a proper left wing back. We were probably definitely missing a target man. And I know you've mentioned Palmer, but Palmer was key for us. He made Parky ball, as we call it, work, because he could bring a ball down, he could release Mullin, he could take the pressure off. Mullin at the start of the season was trying to do everything, and you could tell that by the fact he got sent off 3 times. He was running around like a Tasmanian devil. He was putting his foot high when he didn't need to, because he thought, I have to win the ball back, I have to pass it, I have to make the run, I have to do everything. Palmer took that pressure off him, and they both complemented each other towards the end of the season. So yeah, we always say that Palmer makes Parky ball work. It also freed up the midfield to become a bit more. It was a very industrious midfield, but apart from Davis, it didn't really have much creativity. So we were relying on set plays. We were relying on the Tozer throw-in, which didn't really work to the start of the season. But we, through coaching, we managed to get it to be the weapon that we knew it could be. And I think the other thing you did touch on is keeper. So yeah, Rob Layton got injured at a key part of the season. Christian Dibble's a very willing deputy, but he's a sort of player that you'd want in for 2 to 3 games, probably not 20 games at the back end of the season. And I think he was targeted a few times towards the end of it. He's not the best at coming off his line, even though he is a really good shot stopper. And I think we struggled there. We struggled especially when we lost Hayden, who could take that pressure off Dibble by coming out and heading it away, relieving the pressure. I think, certain times, Boreham Wood away, where we're under it, we're against 10 men. If we'd have had either Leighton or Hayden there, it would have been a different story, and maybe we'd have stopped put under a little bit more pressure than we did.
Yeah, that game plan did progress throughout the season of the long throw, the set pieces. We saw in the playoffs against Stockport, they bullied Stockport home from set pieces, which initially got them out of a lot of trouble. I know you mentioned the Parky ball. It's like Parker time relating to like Fergie time, basically. How Wrexham found a way to win last season, and the threat that Tozer offers, with the long throws, having someone like Palmer in the box, it just shows that game plan and how that can be implemented going into next season. How Wrexham can be a force. Like I saw against Grimsby, and no disrespect to Wrexham whatsoever, on the day I thought Grimsby were the better team. They started better. They were a better side throughout the game. I think it changed different times in the game, but Wrexham managed to equalise and keep coming back. And at one point they were in the lead twice. At one point they managed to get in the league because of those set pieces, which got them out of trouble. Although they're not playing too well, they've got that set piece threat, and it doesn't matter how poor you're playing, you can still score if you've got someone like Tozer who offers something in the air going forward. I think I'd even agree that his throw-ins were probably better than having a corner kick. It were that dangerous, and having someone like Palmer in the box who's 6'3", 6'4", I'm not too sure. You're going to get goals playing that way, and then also having like to Davis who can express going forward. It just shows how Wrexham can play. And I saw that change of how Wrexham played at the start of the season when they came to the Shea. Although they won on the day, I will agree, I thought we were the better side. However, going to Wrexham, although it was away at Wrexham, which is a totally different circumstance, you could sort of see how they've progressed throughout the season with the set pieces, the way they play, the way they close you down. And heading into next season, if they can start off well and keep that consistency going throughout the season, Wrexham are certainly going to be a force. So, yeah, I want to just quickly talk a bit about the rumours with Wrexham. There's no specific rumours apart from Turncliffe, I don't believe. Obviously, there was conspiracies going about Joe Sabara potentially going to Wrexham. Obviously, that's now, I think, been closed off because of him signing a new deal. Would there be anyone for you that maybe not have actually come out from an official platform saying that, they're rumoured with them, that you would actually like to see at Wrexham?
I mean, we've got like an unofficial list on sort of the fans things of like the players that we think fit the criteria. And I think one is Tom Lowry, who's a midfielder at Crewe, because we need that sort of deep lying playmaker. We're also sort of thinking maybe another sort of right wing back. I mean, we'd love the lad Boys who played for Solihull last season. He was really good. So there's sort of people there that we think we quite like, but we didn't really call any of the transfers last season. Yeah. It was people dropping down that we just didn't twig at all. He very much looked to the league rather than non-league. I don't think he brought in anyone who was sort of our level or below. He just concentrated on going to the likes of Cheltenham and getting Tozer, went to Carlisle to get Hayden. So it's not picks that you would normally sort of think, because you would look at people who've been released, people who are close, people you could sort of bring in from there. But the likes of Tozer, he's under contract and he's from Cheltenham. It's not one you'd really call until the rumor went in. The same with James Jones, he's under contract and he's at Lincoln. So they do tend to surprise us with who they bring in, and I'm pretty sure that the first few signings will be anyone who's on our sort of 6 or 7 list, the people we think he might bring in. But definitely, I think if we're looking at the areas we want to strengthen, I think you're right. I think we need a keeper. I think if Tunnicliffe comes in, that will sort out a defensive problem. I'd quite like another right wing back, and probably a left wing back and a midfielder. Now, on top of that, I'm sorry, I know this is a bigger wish list than I started out with, but we have released 2 of our strikers in Ponticelli and Kwame Thomas. So you're probably looking at another striker as well, at least another striker, because I think,
another striker.
Yeah,
that just scares me in itself, depending on who that other striker is for Wrexham. There were rumours. I do watch a Wrexham YouTuber, and he was talking about the latest transfers on YouTube, and he was mentioning Ben Foster. I don't know if that was an official rumour. Obviously, he used to play for Wrexham. Could you, and I know it's quite a big if, and it's quite hard to give like an opinion on it because of how silly it actually sounds, could you see Ben Foster, a keeper like that, coming to Wrexham?
He's 40 years old. I don't think he particularly, I think he's probably made his money, and if he's going to move to another club, I don't particularly think he wants to come in, train all week and sit on the bench. Stranger things have happened. He's got his own YouTube channel. He probably likes a profile. He'll get a bigger profile at Wrexham than he would in many other, League Two clubs or wherever he might be looking. So I think it's an interesting one with Foster. I've heard the rumour as well. I don't think he's going to go and sit on the bench in the Premier League or the Championship. So if he wants to carry on, and I think that's the key thing, because he does have other interests, he wants to play. So where could a player like that play? Yeah, League One, League Two, but why not the Conference? The other thing about that is, would he be first choice? Leighton's a good keeper.
Yeah, he actually is, though, when he's not injured late. And I know there's a lot of thoughts on Dibble and his positioning, his handling of the ball, the weaknesses that he displays at Wrexham. But yeah, talking a bit about this Ben Foster rumour, I don't know if it is, but you talked about like the media exposure that he would get at Wrexham because of having someone like Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, how big they have. They've got millions and millions of followers. Be interesting. It's something that I would be interested to see if it did happen, which I don't believe it will. What would actually happen if Ben Foster went to a club like Wrexham and him going to places like Maidenhead away and playing in there? I think that'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I think that more or less wraps up all three talking about our club specifically. We've had a few people come in from the chat, and also prior to this, just questions have come in. Kevin's come in and said, I'd be interested in everyone's understanding and what characteristics success at National League level takes. Colin, I'll come to you then. What do you feel at this level you need to win the league based off previous years with Stockport, Barrow, Sutton?
Well, I think one of the things to reassure clubs that are sat here going that their club hasn't made many moves and those sort of things. You look at, like say, Stockport, as I said, huge changes very early on in terms of manager and then bringing loads of players in, huge turnaround, which you wouldn't ultimately believe could lead to success. That's not the sort of thing that you'd sit down and, we hear about 5-year plans and those sort of things. So that's to probably reassure clubs who, haven't made or haven't done much business yet, that you can still turn it around, even if it's as late as I think it was November when Stockport started to make their managerial changes. And then I also think about, the story of Grimsby, Grimsby getting out. They had a lot of instability at the start of the season. I think they had a takeover, or they had to sort out their the background to their club and obviously get some stability. And thinking about clubs like Oldham, thinking about clubs like Southend, who had a bit of a wobbly time last season, in the early parts of it, that you can stabilise and you can make those late runs into the playoffs and benefit from it. So I think the interesting thing about the National League is, and we've all got very different narratives here, but what sort of joins us all together is all got very different approaches. And there's very different sort of recipes to get out of it, to be honest. I think some of the clubs that have gone up were not always the favourites. I know that we're sat here as favourites of this season's competition, but the clubs that have got out have not always been, the leaders at the start of the season. So any of those fans who are listening from other National League clubs, you've got a great chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you certainly have. Yeah, I want to talk a bit about then Solihull going into next season, Oldham, Dagenham, some other of the so-called favourites heading into next season. We'll start with Oldham then. Now, I did slightly discuss Oldham on last week's podcast. Andy, I'll come to you. What would you be expecting from Oldham this season then? Like, they've made the additions of Liam Hogan in the centre half position, Windass. We have talked a bit about them in the past. Do you feel that they're well equipped and heading into next season to be trying to head into the playoffs?
I don't know. I mean, it's a club that hasn't done well over the last couple of years, and it's quite hard to shift yourself from that sort of sphere of failure. So it's going to be a big ask for them to come in and be contenders straight away. I would probably think more of a Southend. I think it will take them a while to get used to it, and then I think they'll come on strong to the second half of the season. The fan base is certainly there. It might actually get together more because it's in non-league, but I think it will be a tough ask. Really, really, truly, I do, especially with well-established conference clubs like us who know the league, know who they can get, and know the fact that going away to Maidenhead, as you mentioned earlier, is a pretty tough task and should not be taken lightly. So yeah, I think they're and Scunthorpe are going to struggle initially. I think by then it might be too late for them to mount a challenge.
Yeah, Scunthorpe, but I don't want to discuss them because I see there's no chance in them heading into the playoffs Please don't quote me on that, because end of season they would have won the league probably, knowing my luck. But yeah, I think I think Oldham will be stronger than Scunthorpe heading into next season. Solihull Moors then, Tom, I'll talk a bit about this with you. Now, Joseph Barr obviously was planning on going to Wrexham. Well, I don't know if he was planning. It was rumoured that he was going to Wrexham from a lot of media outlets. He secured his future with Solihull heading into next season. Not too much business from their point of view at this moment in time. What do you expect from them next season?
I'll put it this way: I don't think they're going anywhere. I always thought last season they were always lingering, weren't they? They were probably the team nobody really paid that much attention to. Flew under the radar a little bit, maybe. But Neil Ardley, I think, is a very good manager. He was well backed there, and obviously they've got a very tight-knit group. And I think going back to what Colin said earlier on, there's a lot of different ways to get promoted out of the National League. But I think the one that probably unifies all of them is you need to have a settled style of play, whatever that style of play is, and you need to have good team spirit above all else. I think Grimsby did that very well. I think that's why they went up in the end. And Solihull are another one of those teams. They've got, it might not be the prettiest all the time style of football. They get under your skin. They're one of those teams that do try and win the psychological battle, I think, a little bit. And yeah, they all know the roles. They've got some pretty good players as well. I mean, you look at Sabara, what a fantastic midfielder he is. I'd have loved to have had him at Chesterfield, just as any team in the National League would want him, because he's a very good player. So yeah, they've got a mixture of quality. They know how to win games. They know how to defend well. So they'll be up there again next year for me.
Colin, Dagenham then. What are your thoughts on them heading into next season? They've done quite a lot of interesting business, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think also, going back to what Tom was saying about style, they've come out really strong as an attacking force, attacking unit, and you love to see it. I think that's one of the things that you respect in the opposition, that they'll come out and go for you. And I certainly remember them doing that last season. Like I say, I think it's going to be down to building on expectation. People are aware of Dagenham now, are aware of what to expect in terms of formation, in terms of the fact they're going to go at them and can they consistently do it. If they can consistently do it, then they're going to be a major threat, aren't they? But again, it does come down to the recruitment that they've made. Can they build on that with the expectation that comes from inevitably from a really strong season last season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree. Working another side, I'll just give a quick insight on them. The signing of the ex-Grimsby striker, Newport striker, I'm sure he'll have a good impact on them next season. They've done a lot of interesting business surrounding the National League. Obviously, Ini Effingham has departed from them to join Aldershot. I don't know if that'll be a weakness to them. I think it just depends on how the new striker fills in at Woking. Yeovil, Torquay. There's so many sides that we can talk about, but unfortunately, we are more or less out of time. So cheers to you three for all coming on tonight. Andy, I really appreciate you coming on. For any Wrexham fans watching who haven't discovered Fearless in Devotion, then I would suggest going and giving them a follow on Spotify, I believe it is.
Thanks very much, Luke.
No problem. Tom, I appreciate you coming on once again. If there are any Chesterfield fans watching who haven't discovered Spy Rights Right yet, then I would suggest going and giving them a follow on Spotify as well. Cheers for coming on tonight, Tom.
Cheers, Luke. Cheers for having me.
And Colin, I really appreciate you coming on once again. Go give Analyst Bar a follow on Twitter and Notts County Stats. Cheers for coming on tonight, Colin.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers to everyone that has also tuned in to tonight's edition of the Talking National League podcast. A lot of people have tuned in. I've just seen a few of your messages too. Brilliant. Thank you for the positive feedback on the podcast too. Next week, then, it will be talking about the fixtures that are to be released next Wednesday, I believe. I might be wrong in saying that. And we'll also maybe do a Q&A too, asking for your questions about sides heading to next season. For anyone that is new to the podcast, and this is the first one you've watched, cheers for finding us on YouTube. If you want to see any of the others, we looked into Oldham and Scunthorpe last weekend with a Scunthorpe fan. The previous week, we looked at some of the newly promoted clubs, the likes of York and Dorking, and how they will fulfil their potential going into next season. The week before that was more of just an overview of heading into this season. Yeah, lots to come on the National League podcast. Also, a quick mention to Non-League Bible. Cheers for partnering with the channel. Go find him on all the social media platforms. FanHub as well. They've done me a big favour. If you look on your club feeds, if you are on the app, all my content will be there on the National League podcast. Go give them a follow on all the social medias, and remember to download the app. There's a link in the description for that. Once again, everyone who's watched, I really appreciate you coming on, watching, and I really appreciate to you guys for also coming on, and I will see you next week. Thank you.
Cheers.